Welcome back to Alchemical Astrology. There are many talented and well-heeled astrologers out there who are offering transit reports with great accuracy and regularity. I'm not here to compete with them. My intention with this channel is to bridge the gap between esoteric teachings by demonstrating the parallels and cohesion between methodologies. Astrology, alchemy, kabbalah, and tarot all have commonalities that support and enhance each other. If your ultimate goal is to transcend the ordinary, then keep watching. When I was growing up, I cultivated an obsession with world mythology. By no means do I have a mastery of all the narratives, but I've also been studying astrology for over 2 decades, and I still feel I'm just scratching the surface on the richness of material and depth of wisdom we can achieve through dedicated research on both of these topics. One thing I've concluded in both cases is that we have an obligation to write the best possible storyline for ourselves as we walk through this world. Astrology and the ancient myths can serve as a great roadmap towards that goal. Why should you believe this to be true? The first premise to consider, and the foundation of this argument, is the concept that you are the hero in your soul's journey. Joseph Campbell, a name you might be familiar with, dedicated his entire life to synthesizing and presenting a thesis on this very subject and published a book in 1949 entitled The Hero with a Thousand Faces. I highly recommend you get your hands on a copy, as it has stood the test of time and is more relevant today than it may have been when he first offered it up to the public. In fact, Campbell's work has served as an inspiration for many creatives, including George Lucas, the guy who made Star Wars. So how exactly does all this tie into astrology? First, I'd like to reintroduce you to a character you may have come across in your early education by the name of Hercules, or as the Greek would pronounce it, Heracles. As is often the case, this dude was the product of a union with Zeus and a mortal, who in this case happened to be the granddaughter of Perseus, the other hero who slew Medusa, but that's a conversation for another day. Long story short, Hera, Zeus's wife, wasn't very happy about her husband's philanderings and made every effort to eliminate the offspring produced. That included Hercules. She tried to take him out with 2 snakes in the cradle, but the infant strangled them both, the serpent of matter and the serpent of illusion. The queen of the gods wasn't very forgiving by nature, so years later, when Hercules married and had children, she drove him mad, causing him to murder his wife and kids. To atone for this horrific tragedy, he went to the Delphic oracle, and she advised him to serve his cousin, King Eurystheus. The king originally assigned him 10 tasks, and then added 2 as he had looked for assistance with 2 of them. Here's the connection to note regarding his labors. The marking of time in ancient days consisted of a calendar divided into 10 months. That was subsequently changed to 12 during the Roman era. There are now 12 months in a year. A year is the time it takes for the Earth to travel around the sun. The ecliptic, which is the sun's path across the sky, as seen from a terrestrial viewpoint, is a projection of the plane of Earth's orbit around the sun. This path is delineated by 12 constellations, what we know as the zodiac, from the Greek zodiakos kirkios, circle of animal signs. 12 months, 12 signs, 12 labors. This is where it gets even more interesting. When you deconstruct the actual feats Hercules was expected to accomplish, there is a direct correspondence with the stars we recognize today as the zodiacal constellations. I will illustrate this for the sake of clarity and, more importantly, to give you a springboard on how you might be as successful as Hercules in navigating the challenges presented by each sign in your own hero's journey, because we are, after all, demigods with amnesia. My historical reference on the 12 Labors of Hercules is Alice Bailey's book by the same name, if you're interested in doing your own research. I'll put a link to this and any other books or articles mentioned in the description below. Just to add even more layers to this formula, here's a depiction of the hero's journey organized in a wheel. And oh, look, there are 12 steps. Take a screenshot of this diagram, as it will serve you well in the future, even if you're not a screenwriter. Remember, you are the author of your own story. Consider also that there are 12 houses in every natal chart. The Wheel of Houses represents Earth's 24-hour rotation on its own axis and specific areas of life that transiting planets will be pointing at to get your attention. It's pretty obvious by now that everything I've outlined is a fractal based on 12. Keep this principle firmly in your mind for the rest of this discussion and perhaps even the rest of your life path. Okay, so back to Hercules. Our Greek hero is guided by a mentor throughout each of his assignments in order to reach a gateway through which he will pass when successful. There are 12 gateways represented by each of the zodiac signs. Visualize these tasks as initiatory rituals or rites of passage, something we are decidedly lacking in our so-called advanced civilization, which, in my view, is one of the key reasons mental illness has skyrocketed. Rarely are we acknowledged for having survived our ordeals, and that really needs to change. But I digress. 3 things I want to emphasize as we go through the list of Herculean challenges. Firstly, we are assuming throughout this narrative that the purpose of the soul is to ascend from the density of matter. This is the running theme in alchemy, kabbalah, and tarot as well. Secondly, I'm looking at this whole process from a Jungian perspective. My lens, so to speak, encompasses consciousness and the collective as it applies to integrating the shadow. Thirdly, I'm approaching these stories as allegories. You're not expected to interpret the events literally, but symbolically. So grab a cup of your favorite elixir, gather around the sacred fire of Vesta, and open yourselves up to the wisdom of the eternal flame as we dive right in to our story. The vernal equinox is the beginning of spring and represents the start of a new cycle in the wheel of the year. This seasonal cross point is ruled by Mars in the sign of Aries. Hercules, as the initiate, is poised at the first gate of the cardinal fire sign. His task is to capture the wild, man-eating mares of war belonging to Diomedes, the son of Mars, Aries. His first attempt is a fail, as he calls on his dear friend Abderis to help him. The herd is captured, but Hercules, thinking the job is done, expects his friend to lead them through the gate. Abderis is trampled to death, and a grief-stricken Hercules must now round up the fierce horses on his own, and does so successfully. What is the lesson here? The horses represent our primitive impulses, which, if left unchecked, can lead us to destructive acts. This is the shadow side of Aries. This sign rules the head, and it is a matter of harnessing one's thoughts if we are to conquer the world of matter. On the opposite side of this sign is Libra, ruled by Venus. It takes 5 more labors before Hercules can arrive at that place of balance on this axis point. Bear in mind that the lunar nodes are now currently at the Aries-Libra axis point. Humanity is being tasked with precisely the same challenge right now on a global scale. A solitary Hercules is left to ponder the loss of his friend as he stands at the set of pillars for the second labor. Upon crossing the threshold, he finds himself on the island of Crete, where a bull is terrorizing the people. Of course, this is an easy celestial grouping to identify. All you have to do is look at the placement of Orion and Taurus in the night sky, as seen in this image from Cognarque. Hercules is expected to capture this bull and lead it to the place where the Cyclops dwell. The sacred bull emanates a light from its forehead, by which Hercules tracks it to its lair with encouragement of the seven sisters, the Pleiades, a cluster of stars located in the Taurus constellation. He manages to mount the bull, whose light, I would venture to say, is the royal fixed star Aldebaran, shows the path across the separating sea to the sacred place occupied by the three Cyclops who meet him on arrival. Taurus is the first fixed sign in the cross of matter representing the element of earth. As such, it represents the place of earthly desire. Taurus is the creative force wanting to expand, the Word made flesh. But if the focus remains purely in the physical realm, then the shadow of this sign takes over and one is subjected to an endless appetite for the material, carnal, that knows no relief. In other words, Hercules passes the second test by conquering his animal nature. As Alice Bailey puts it, matter will no longer be prostituted to selfish desire. This is achieved by handing the bull over to the light of the third eye, the soul in its three divine aspects. In a land far, far away, there grew a sacred tree known as the Tree of Wisdom, which produced golden apples. This tree was tended to by three daughters of Atlas known as the Hesperides. That's the triplicity making its presence known again. A dragon by the name of Ladon guarded this tree that was a wedding gift from Hera to Zeus. It was up to Hercules to steal these apples and bring them to King Eurystheus. He is told by his mentor there will be 5 minor tests to be passed as part of this third assignment. Please note that this task was one added to his original list of 10 as he had asked for assistance in his 8th labor representing the sign of Scorpio, which is the polar opposite to Taurus. It is important to always keep in mind these axes points, as overcoming the shadow aspect of each sign involves integrating the opposite. Fixed earth meets fixed water, both feminine elements by their nature. My advice here is to avoid the trap of perceiving this narrative on a purely linear level as we proceed. So Hercules searches high and low and can't orient himself in the right direction to find the tree, even after a messenger, Nereus, was sent by his guide to offer him clues. Having failed the first of 5 tests, he moves southwards until he encounters a giant known as Antaeus, with whom he wrestles unsuccessfully, until he thinks to lift him off the ground. Antaeus's mother was Gaia, Earth, and she was the source of his strength. Cut him off by lifting him up, and you win. Test 2 is passed. Moving westwards, he runs into Busiris, son of the waters, closely related to Poseidon, Neptune, the great illusionist. Busiris presents himself as a sage with all the answers and the only one to be followed. His pitch: my truth is right, all other truth is wrong and false. Stay with me and be saved. Convinced our hero to stay put. Test number 3, another fail. This costs Hercules a full year of being bound to an altar. Ostensibly, that's the same cross of matter delineating the fixed signs of Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, as seen here in the Major Arcana Tarot card number 21, the World. I hope you're getting a better view of how all these esoteric paths lead to the same goal. It's only when Hercules remembers the words spoken by Nereus that he manages to free himself from bondage. Truth lies within yourself. Turn inwards and there evoke the strength, which is the heritage of all the sons of men who are the sons of God. Hercules seizes the false teacher and puts him on the altar, moving on after losing a year's time. On his way, he hears cries of anguish and tries to stay on his path, but the cries are horrifying, and he is compelled to investigate. He discovers the Titan Prometheus bound to a rock, while his liver is consumed daily by an eagle sent by Zeus to punish him for giving humanity the gift of fire. Hercules sets Prometheus free, and in exchange is told to seek out Atlas to assist with his pursuit of the golden apples. By being of service to others, Hercules passes test number 4 and heads eastward for his prize. Upon encountering Atlas, who is burdened with holding up the sky for eternity, Hercules works out a deal whereby Atlas grabs the apples while Hercules temporarily takes his place. Atlas retrieves the apples and tries to trick Hercules in staying there permanently, but Hercules outsmarts him and delivers the apples as requested. So what does Gemini have to teach us? Gemini is the sign of the twins, and hence represents the very duality in which we are living our lives, form and spirit. This is also reflected by the 2 pillars in the tarot card as seen in the High Priestess and the Kabbalistic tree of life. The higher self, represented here by the messenger Nereus, is first ignored by Hercules. Caught up in his own monkey mind, he fails to register the downloads being offered. Gemini is a mutable air sign, able to morph and present many faces. It is ruled by the trickster Mercury. Hercules is easily distracted while meandering in his environment, getting only occasional flashes of insight. The voices pulling him every which way are only silenced when he discovers that acts of kindness point to the higher path of transmutation, thereby converting experiential knowledge gained through the 5 senses into the wisdom of the soul. The 3 nymphs represent the higher mind in which intelligence, love, and will work in unison. The opposite sign of Gemini is Sagittarius, the archer whose aim is straight and true. The aspirant who has unified body and soul. It is interesting to note at the mundane level that the United States birth chart has a Sagittarius rising. We shall see in the months to come whether this nation can rise above and hit the target accurately. Speaking of targets, in the 4th of the preparatory labors, Hercules is required to capture the golden-horned Cernaean hind or doe. This deer was sacred to the moon goddess Artemis, and he would risk her wrath if harm came to the animal. He tracked it far and wide for a full year as the deer eluded him at every turn. Finally, when she stopped by a quiet pool to rest, he shot an arrow at her foot to immobilize her and clasped her to his heart, carrying her back with him. Artemis and her twin brother Apollo both confront him before he can declare victory, and Hercules explains the situation to them. He is allowed to continue on the condition that the deer is set free after delivery. Hercules calls out to the king, announcing he has caught the doe, and demands that the king come out to behold his prize and claim it. Just as the king reaches out, Hercules releases the hind, and it returns safely to Artemis, fully intact. Cancer is the 4th sign of the zodiac, and though the constellation of the crab may appear small in the sky, it is staggeringly significant in its role as the last of the initiatory steps. It is here that the summer solstice occurs in the northern hemisphere. Having mastered the mind, earthly desires and realizing the dualistic nature of terrestrial life, Hercules is now ready to be birthed into the human kingdom, rising above the animal phase. Many ancient texts define Cancer as the entry point of souls, whereas the opposite point, during which the winter solstice occurs in Capricorn, is where souls exit the plane of existence. Cancer is the first point mass consciousness is made evident. Instinct now makes way for intuition. Cancer is ruled by the moon. Artemis is a moon goddess. Her brother represents the other luminary, the sun. By way of the light of both the sun and moon, the seeker comes to realize that there is more to life than meets the eye. And the time has come to explore the more subtle and elusive layers of existence made available through the heart center.